Welcome to our workshop on building a better thesis statement. What we're going to do today is I'm going to go over a couple of features of thesis statements. As a group or as pairs, we're going to talk about identifying problems in thesis statements, how to improve them, and then kind of end the session with a little bit of practice on thesis statements. Okay? So how many of you are here for a particular writing course? Or how many of you are here just for fun? Writing courses? Quite a few. Lit or comp?
Lit.
Lit, comp, lit, comp. Okay. All right, so what is a thesis statement? Hi. Come on. Go ahead. Grab the packet.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so what is a thesis statement? A thesis statement is quite simply a single sentence that identifies the primary purpose of an essay. It tells the reader what your essay is about. It tells the reader what your essay is going to attempt to do. And it gives a bit of direction as to where the essay is going to go from there. There are three primary types of thesis statements. There's informative. The purpose of an informative is quite simply to inform. If you're doing education courses or social work or nursing, you're going to be much more familiar with informative thesis statements and informative essays than you would be doing persuasive essays. The second one is persuasive. The purpose of a persuasive thesis or persuasive essay is to persuade someone to believe what you want to believe, to ask them to take action, change policy, change their belief system, what they feel about something, in general to make them think differently. And then the third one that you might see often is called an implied thesis. An implied thesis means there isn't a single sentence that you can identify as a thesis statement, but by reading the text or reading the essay, you can pretty much figure out what the person is trying to get across. So, a thesis statement consists of three primary components. You can kind of think of it like a mathematical equation. If you don't have all three components, you don't have a thesis statement. Something is missing. So the three components are a limited topic, a controlling idea, and this concept of so what. And if you get a little confused by the language or the vocabulary, you can think of it in more simplistic terms. A limited topic is the what of your essay, right? What specifically is your topic? The controlling idea is sometimes called general concept. That's the how of your topic. So here's my topic, and here is how I'm going to approach that topic. Here is the perspective. And then the so what is the why of your topic. The so what part is probably the part that most students tend to forget. So what is the topic? How are you approaching that topic? And finally, why are you approaching this topic? So why is this important? Why is this important to discuss? And why is it important to someone who might be reading it? So when you're given an assignment, you generally start with some vague idea as to what you want to write about. So if you're writing issue paper, you might have something big like gun control. Gun control, capital punishment, the cost of rising tuition, all of these are huge, huge topics. Those are called vague generalization, broad topics, general topics, lots of different vocabulary for this. The problem is that if you've ever tried to write a paper on a broad topic, you should know that you're dealing with a lot of sources. It's hard to decide what sources you want to use, and it's hard to really specify and give a really good essay on your topic. So one way to think about whether or not you have a broad topic or a limited topic is to say, well, can I fully cover this issue in the time allotted or the space allotted? So if your topic is gun control, can you cover everything about gun control in a 4-page paper? No. If you say yes, we have issues. In general, you should not be able to cover every possible complexity about gun control in a 4-page paper. So you have to think about, how do I limit this? How do I focus? How do I change the topic so I can cover it fully in the space allotted? And that's where we get to something called a limited topic. That's when you start to narrow down your topic so you can start to develop a much more specific thesis. So as a group, we're starting with the topic violence in movies. And so the first thing you want to do, this is a big topic, right? What kind of movies am I talking about? What kind of violence am I talking about? Off the top of your head, how many movies can you think of that have violence in it? Probably hundreds, if not thousands, right? So one of the things you want to do with this topic is start to think about, how do I limit this? How do I make it more specific? How do I change violence movies to something that I can actually talk about in a limited time space? So can you guys think of anything, any ways that you might be able to limit a broad topic like violence in movies? Questions you might ask? Ways that you can limit such a broad category? By actor, that would be one.
Script of the movie.
What do you mean by script?
How to write the movie, like you can limit on violence in the script itself, or how you act in that.
Oh, so the performance of violence and the role that it plays in a script?
Yeah.
Sure. Other ways you could limit the topic?
Topics of the violence. Violence about cars, violence about football.
Yeah, the space or the context that violence occurs in. You could also limit it by the type of movie. So are we talking about cartoons? Are we talking about martial arts? Are we talking about comic book films, romantic comedies, et cetera, et cetera? You could limit it by time. You could limit it by style. Is it a cartoon? Is it a live action? Is it something else? So all ways that you can limit such a broad topic. The second piece of the thesis statement is called a controlling idea. Again, sometimes it's called general concept. So depending on what textbook you're using or the professor's language, those are fairly interchangeable. So the controlling idea is simply the opinion, belief, attitude, or perspective about your topic. So if you think about it in terms of a persuasive essay, you need to have a stance, essentially. You need to make a stand, or you need to make a particular argument. And then, when you go through your controlling idea, you need to say, how do you answer, or how do you feel about your topic, essentially. So these are some ways that you could start to think about a controlling idea, depending on what your topic is. So why are electric cars better than fuel-based cars? That's asking you to compare and contrast and make a decision, right? And so the answer that you have for this will lead you to a controlling idea or perspective. Are there other ways to evaluate student progress than current methods? So that asks for new ideas in a way to challenge current ideas. And inevitably, depending on how you answer that, you will be making an argument, or you'll be making a stance as to what would be a more effective method. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Right, that's some pop culture humor. How is one the loneliest number? The last one, what do I want my audience to do or know about opioid addiction treatment? And so this might be something more appropriate for an informative essay, where you're starting to ask questions about the most important pieces of information that someone might need to know. So these are all ways to think about how to develop a perspective on your limited topic. So if we go to the initial broad topic that I had, I already started to narrow it down. And what I decided to do is to talk about physical violence in animated Disney movies. So then what you want to do is you want to start asking questions that might lead you to an opinion about physical violence in animated Disney movies. So what kind of questions might you ask about this topic to kind of get to a perspective?
How often is physical violence in the movies?
How often does physical violence occur in the movies? Yeah, that would be one thing to ask. Other potential questions?
What's the point of physical violence in this movie?
Right, what does the violence do?
Type and style again.
What do you mean by type and style?
Type and style, like what kind of violence is it? Is it physical hitting, shooting, blowing up? And then like the style, is it humorous violence, or is it meant to be
Serious.
Dark and serious?
Other questions you could ask would be, who is the target of the violence? So if you think about Disney films, Quite often, the target of violence is going to be a parent. If you think about The Lion King or Bambi or Dumbo, all of these films, the parent is the subject of the violence, as are the villains, and whoever the villain is lashing out on. You can also ask what would be a motivation for this physical violence. So what context does it occur in, who does it, and why do they do it? So these are all questions that you could ask. So as you're thinking about answering your controlling idea, the question you ask for your controlling idea, whatever you answer has to be in the thesis statement. So if I was going to talk about the target of physical violence, whatever I feel about the target of physical violence would have to appear in my thesis statement. Okay? The third component is this so what. And again, this is the thing that most students forget about when they're writing thesis statements. It's probably the hardest part of a thesis statement, but it's also one of the most important parts of a thesis statement. So a so what helps to direct your argument or helps to direct your point, but more importantly, it tells readers exactly why they should care about your topic. So the so what answers why is this particular perspective of yours important? Why is this topic important? And that could be a way of discussing who it affects or how it affects people. It offers a reason to care, a shift in understanding, or a new interpretation of a text. It suggests a compelling reason to change a current process or approach. One of the ways that I like to talk about it in my class is, so what often answers why are you making your classmates and why are you making your professor read this paper? So what are they actually learning from this, and how are you contributing to what they already know? So what gives the reader the why. And so this is the topic that we started with. I whittled it down more. So physical violence against parents is an important piece of the child's development journey. That is the so what. So I whittled it down by my limited topic to physical violence in Disney animated films. My controlling idea has to do with what I feel about that violence, which has to do with parents. And then the so what is the outcome of this. So why is it necessary, or what is significant about analyzing physical violence against parents in Disney films? And what I came up with is that it separates the child from the parent and puts the child in a position to grow and develop in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. And so that adds information, that adds an interpretation of the text that wouldn't be there otherwise. Questions so far? No? Okay. So from here, I start to piece my thesis statement together. Now I will say this is rough, and I want it to be rough. It's fairly long, it can be condensed, but I want you to see how those pieces come together in a cohesive way. So my thesis at this point, in Disney animated films, parents are the targets of physical violence. This violence serves to separate them from children, which has the effect of forcing children to set out on their own and eventually begin to grow up. So this is simply so you can see how the limited topic, the controlling idea, and the so what all come together into a single sentence, albeit a rather lengthy single sentence. So what I want you to do is to take your handout and turn to the page that says tips. Unfortunately, it's a bit out of order. It's about in the middle. It says tips for thesis statements. So this is mostly for you. It gives you some examples of turning broad topics into limited topics. It gives examples of how they become thesis statements. What I want you to do after you've kind of glanced over this is turn to the next page. And it's the last page. It says identify the problems. So these are 5 thesis statements that have relatively common problems. So what I'm going to ask you to do for about 3 or 4 minutes is to look over them and see if you can figure out what the problems might be with these thesis statements. Is it an issue where it's too wordy, it's non-assertive, it's missing a component, it doesn't make a stand? So I'll give you 3 minutes and then we'll kind of come back. So I'm going to stop you. I will read out the thesis statement, and then you guys tell me what you noticed about its problems. So what stood out to you? So the first one, the World's Fair in New Orleans was a disaster because of the way the press criticized the way it was run, but it was exciting for little children and had many good food booths. So what did you identify in this particular sentence as a problem?
Conflicting.
What do you mean?
Like in the first sentence it says about disaster, and then it goes on to say like exciting and good.
So what's the problem specifically?
It's like two different ideas. It doesn't really define what it's kind of saying.
Yeah, it's two different ideas, it's sort of a pros and cons, and it doesn't actually have a controlling idea, it doesn't have a perspective. So yeah, this is sort of a statement of fact, it's pros and cons. It could be developed into one if someone wanted to talk about the reasons that the World's Fair was a disaster and argue for one specific one, which is what it starts to do, but then it switches to another topic. Number two, TV commercials are obnoxious to the person who is intent on watching a good show. On the other hand, they provide entertainment in the antics of the performers, and they provide a good opportunity to take a snack break. So what did you think about that, Giles?
Too many ideas.
Too many ideas? Yeah, it is. It doesn't have a focus. Anything else?
I said conflicting also because it goes from obnoxious to entertaining.
It does have conflicting ideas again. Any others? It doesn't really have a so what, right? There's no indication as to why anyone should care about this. So it could be shifted to talk about better types of marketing. If you were doing a marketing paper, it could be switched to better discuss the impacts of commercials on people's viewing habits. Those are all potential topics, but not the way the sentence is phrased now. Number three, since politicians are constantly bombarding each other, how do they expect anyone to know who is right and who is wrong? So, thoughts on this one?
Missing the so what.
It is missing a so what? Yes? Anyone else?
So it was announcing a subject rather than taking a stand.
It's what, I'm sorry?
Announcing a subject rather than taking a specific stand.
Right, it's asking a question as opposed to making a stand. Yep. Number four, unless people are conscious of pollution, the world will be destroyed by the year 2050. Any thoughts on that one?
It's an announcement instead of a thesis.
It's an announcement instead of a thesis. What makes it more of an announcement than a thesis?
It's an opinion, rather than a fact-based opinion.
Well, opinions are okay in a thesis as long as there's facts to help you analyze. So that's not necessarily a problem. But it's a very broad topic, right? There's no limiting topic here. It doesn't say like what kind of pollution it is. It also makes this argument about people have to be conscious of pollution rather than taking any sort of active steps. And it doesn't actually talk about what would be the destruction of this world. So it lacks a lot of pieces. Number five, rap is both a creative and original form of music. It also has its roots in American jazz. So thoughts about this one?
Is it missing the so what?
It is missing a so what? Any others?
So conflicting to saying it's original and then saying that's come from somewhere else.
Right, we do have a conflict in ideas. If it was connected better to indicate that even though it's an original creative form, it still has roots, that would be different, but that's not what it does. So the most common mistakes that people make in thesis statements are many of the ones we just talked about. So statement of fact, ask the question, too wordy, too broad, incomplete thought or sentence, uses the spotlight phrase, which I'll come back to in a second, weak language, or missing one of the three components. So in some of the sentences that you just had, there were a lot of words associated with emotion and not necessarily argumentative types of language. So words like I feel, I believe, those sort of words, that's considered weak language. The spotlight phrase, generally you try to shy away from it. Those are words like I will argue, I believe, I feel, my argument is. Those sort of phrases are generally supposed to be absent from essays, and that's because if your argument isn't clear without that language, then you have a problem anyways. Generally, the only time you use that kind of stuff is when you're giving oral presentation, because it helps the reader or the listener follow you. So, the most common problems in thesis statements. So what I wanted to have you guys do as practice is go through the process of going from a really general topic and then at some point coming up with a potential thesis statement. So these are 4 very, very broad topics: opioid addiction in West Virginia, rising college tuition, athletics at Concord, and if you want to do something less serious, Marvel films versus DC films. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is, if you're comfortable finding a partner, if you want to work by yourself, you're welcome to. And I want you to see if you and your partner can go through the steps of taking a really general topic, finding a limited topic, a controlling idea, and a so what, and then coming up with a thesis statement. I fully recognize these are probably topics that you are not completely informed about, and so it's okay to make stuff up right now, simply because this is about putting together a thesis statement, not necessarily being accurate. Okay? So if you want to work with a partner, by all means, work with a partner. If you want to work by yourself, you're welcome to do that. But most importantly, I want you to go through the steps. So what questions would you ask in order to come up with a limited topic? Once you have a limited topic, what questions do you ask to get your controlling idea? And once you have your controlling idea, what is the so what? And then see if you can piece together a thesis statement that doesn't fall into the traps that we just talked about.
Do you start off with like a topic sentence and then work from that?
No, you're basically just brainstorming. Just brainstorm, come up with questions, how to limit the topic, and then I think one sentence with these statements is perfectly fine. Those would be examples of one.
Is there a second?
But if you're going to think about literature as better characters, you want to think about how you find better
Single parent, not single parent, you raised them.
Okay, so you might think about, the so what is important because education is a problem. But you also want to think about so what as a way to get to suggest that change. And that would make it even stronger. So if you can say not just college tuition shouldn't go higher, but how you actually deal with that is a much stronger thesis and generate a stronger.
Provide this person a problem.
Yeah. And because you're dealing with an issue as opposed to like a different type of topic, sometimes the solution is really effectively. Yeah. But you can say, right, that education is a really effective way to solve poverty, therefore the state should institute blah, blah, blah to reduce poverty. Well, it's fairly rough right now. You have to spend time like cleaning it up. But, you know, it's a start.
So what if I would change this whole sentence, I would get rid of it, and then I would say because coal mining industry is shutting down, that's
So, yeah, so you could do it as like an identification of a problem. So because the coal industry is in serious decline in West Virginia, there's money to go into education.
oh no, I'll get rid of the whole education.
Oh. But what would coal mining have to do with tuition?
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, there's two ways you could approach this, right? That coal mining produced really high-paying jobs here, and people had money to go to college, right? But if you don't have any jobs in the first place, then people can't afford to go to college, right? So tuition is a bigger deal. Take it that way. Or you could say, you know, how coal, the economy is struggling, therefore people to education and creates high tuition. Like those are two completely separate ways you can approach that.
What do you think is missing?
I think a really solid so what is missing. What do you want someone to do? What do you want to change? So it's not necessarily enough to say, we need to change this. You have to actually say, what would that change potentially?
Okay.
So it's good that you say it should be priority for this.
How would we achieve that?
Yeah. So you also have to think about like when you're coming up with a are you sort of singing to the choir, as you can say? So are you saying what most people would do? So I would say even the state legislature, they would feel that education is a way, or education is a way of overcoming poverty. The problem arises. So you don't want to state some of the most challenge in the current things.
I know we are different talks about like
Sure.
and bringing more violence.
I would focus on one. Yeah, just one. Yeah, so we're going to talk about jobs and economy and businesses coming in. I think that's fine. So the so what is very clear. The so what is very clear, which is simply that like this opioid addiction isn't just about the individual, it's about an entire group of people that are interested. So then how do you develop? So what would you want to do? Like opioid addiction needs to be what needs to be prioritized over, it needs to be have more money for the address in a different way, you know, anything like that. We don't have time for all. You stuck on anything? Your question about tuition rising? So obviously, you can come up with this. And you want to probably say something about maybe why that's not as good enough to do tuition, or how you offset that tuition. Right, so most of the money is coming from paying for supplies and things for education, right, that are left, or whatever. Is that something you can cut? As opposed to if rising tuition is mostly going to offset amenities or athletics or, yeah, something like that. Better food. So then, that's all fine, but I think you still need to have. So why, you know, if you're not a lower income person, why do you care? So, a way to ask this is like, who should pay? And that would be a question of also addressing. So who do you want to do this? This is a problem. Why do you want to do something? Okay. And again, I don't expect you guys to be experts. So, that would be something that I have to make a reason why this is so it's the one. So obviously they still do that. So what you would be advocating is that something about it needs to change, or it needs to be emphasized more.
Something like.
So one way to think about it is if young adults from 18 to 23 years old are primarily addicted, we want to get them before they become addicted. Right, so we used to focus on like more robust adolescent programs too. Remember, you don't be right.
It's like what's coming on the phone because
That would be fine, and so what?
so what? So what?
Who are you writing to? So does that mean if it's the labor pool, who would most care about who is who would most care whether or not they can, whether or not people can work? Or so what? So who cares about this? Probably
Employers should have a time.
West Virginia has a high rate of opioid addiction, affecting those in the 1826 medals for broken homes.
I don't think you can broken homes anymore. You're talking about labor.
Who's the most successful team?
I think you still need like a, because you're dealing with commission, you probably still need a solution of that. So what do you want this to be? Because opioid addiction, which targets the labor pool, the employer should some. Yeah. Right, they should, or, yeah, they should all provide insurance for rehabilitation. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you. We only have about 5 more minutes. Would anyone like to share what they came up with? I mean, I think I spoke to everybody, but if you want to share with the group, that would be great. Giles?
Are you going to get feedback?
Yeah, or the class will give you feedback.
Alright, well, I say Marvel films tend to be better than DC films. They sell more and get more views than the DC.
Okay, what do you guys think?
I don't think I have a good so what.
You are missing a so what. Right now you have a statement of fact, assuming that backs it up with the box office and all that stuff. But yeah, you're missing a stance, like an argument, and you're missing a so what. So what could Giles potentially do here? If anyone wants to give him some feedback. So you can think about what makes Marvel films better than DC. Why would people maybe be going to those films over DC films? We'll just ignore Batman versus Superman and its existence. What is it about the characters, or the plots, or the
Movie quality?
the what?
Movie quality, visual quality?
The quality of the acting and the cinematography and the special effects, yeah. So what is it about Marvel films and Marvel characters that makes people want to go see that more than DC films? And that would be a way to get a controlling idea, because that's really what you're lacking right now.
What about a so what?
Once you get the controlling idea, I think the so what would be important. So if you were to say, like, Marvel films outsell DC films because the characters are more well-rounded and people can, empathize or see themselves in those characters. Therefore, DC maybe needs to change some of the way they approach film or something like that. Raheem?
Mine has a problem of weak language. It's too wordy.
Too wordy? Okay.
Yeah. I said college tuition shouldn't go any higher in West Virginia because this state is one of the poorest states in the country, and education is a very effective way to solve that. Therefore, there should be tuition waiver programs for the working class families funded by the millionaires' taxes money.
Okay, so Brahim has already said it's too wordy, and I would agree, but again, these are rough thesis statements, so that's totally understandable. But what do you guys think of the thesis itself? The argument he makes? Does it have all 3 components? Do you see any other red flags? No one? So Brahim, I would say it was fine, but I would try to figure out a way to condense it. Otherwise, the ideas are good. You have all the components, you make a stance, you have a so what. It's just about making it nice and concise and pretty. Okay, how about one more? Anyone want to share? No? Okay, does anyone have any questions about thesis statements? Giles?
Do you put it in your introduction paragraph, or it stands by itself?
That's a good question. So generally in writing classes, we tell you to put it in the first paragraph. Lit courses are often the same way. And that's mostly just because you guys are still learning how to write. You need practice. Bless you. And by putting it in the first paragraph, you at least know it's there. But there are plenty of examples where people do not put it in the first paragraph. So certainly when I write, my thesis statement often goes in the third, sometimes the fourth, sometimes the fifth paragraph. There are some essays where the paragraph or the thesis statement actually belongs at the bottom because of the way it's organized. Generally the first paragraph. Any other questions? Okay, so just as a reminder, the three components of a thesis statement. So when you guys are putting together your thesis statement for whatever class it is, remember that you need those three things. How limited can you make your topic? What perspective or belief are you going to argue? And why should anyone care about this topic? Okay? All right, thank you all for coming. If you are here for extra credit, make sure you fill out those note cards unless you're one of my students. I know who you are. And if your professor wants you to turn something in, the back page is for extra credit work. The very back page. The very back page is what you have to give to me as part of your extra credit. And your class is going to get that anyway. You just get it.
All right, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you very much.